phones off. All right, we're good to go. We're already rolling. And this, I'm really happy. We're on this show. We're starting to bring in the big guns. We're starting. I'm kidding, obviously. I love all our previous guests, but Hannes is here from oeksound. We're gonna do this. All right, let's start this properly, okay? Yes! Oh my! Welcome to the Podcast Engineering Show. Oh yeah! My name is Chris Curran. I'm going to introduce Hannes in 1 second. I produce podcasts for medium and large companies, and this show, every week, we bring you podcast production techniques on a silver platter. We really talk shop with podcast producers, engineers, and other specialists. And I have a background in audio engineering in the music business, and therefore I'm able to share a lot of audio production insights and techniques that really help podcasters. So if you implement the best of what you learn here, your podcast will sound a lot better, and you'll spend less time producing them. And Barry's here. Barry, are you psyched for... Dude, I can't even imagine... Wait, hold on, Barry. Get on the mic. Are you psyched for Hannes Andersson today?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. He's the marketing manager at oeksound. oeksound, everybody. Does that sound familiar? Yeah. They make soothe2. Soothe2. And this is one of my secret weapons in podcast production, honestly. They also make spiff, which is a transient shaper of sorts, which is really awesome too, but I don't use that one as much. But oeksound is a really cool company based in Helsinki, Finland. Hannes, you're the marketing manager. Welcome to the Podcast Engineering Show, man.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, happy to have you here. And you are also a songwriter and a music producer, and you've done quite a lot of mixing in your career as well, which is that's sort of my specialty as well. So, wow, you've been involved in audio for a while and have a lot of experience. So thank you for coming on here.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I think that goes for most of the people in oeksound as a company, that we all have that kind of background in as musicians or mixing engineers or anything.
Right? Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, you're making plugins that are awesome. And you said oeksound, right?
Yeah, I like to pronounce it that way. It's not a problem to pronounce it as oeksound, as the tree oak.
Right.
But I think the Finnish way would be oeksound without any kind of diphthong on the first syllable.
Right.
So oek is fine.
Yeah, oeksound. I like that. I like learning things. Like I was telling you before we rolled, that I'm one of these stupid Americans who knows nothing about the rest of the world. Although I've been to India many times, and my wife is Indian, and I've traveled a little bit, but still, Americans are largely uncultured, as everyone, as you know, everyone else in the world knows that. Americans don't know that, but
yeah, it's actually a little known fact that the OEK is actually our founder's name. It's his, so it's his initials, Olli Erik Keskinen.
Oh, cool. Yeah, me and my wife, we really want to visit Finland, and I don't know why. Like, sometimes you just want to, like, yeah, that'd be cool to go. I'd like to go there. Like, yeah. I mean, obviously now with the situation, well, whatever. We're not going to talk about that because I don't want to, whatever. Anyway, so let's first, we're going to talk about, we're really going to talk about soothe2 a lot, because this plugin is just amazing for podcast production. But first, you have a good equipment setup over there. So let's real quick go through what you're speaking into right now and what interface you have and all that. Tell us.
Oh, yeah. Right now, for something like this, I'm using an SM7, of course, SM7B, running through an Universal Audio Apollo 8P interface. So it's the one that has like eight preamps in it, and I love the Unison preamps on it. I actually am using it. So what you're hearing right now is actually some processing that I'm using UAD plugins for.
Oh.
I have the precision channel strip as just some normal compression and EQ, and then I have a distressor after that, and then I have just a normal 1176, the Rev E compressor after that. So it's kind of just leveling, making sure that nothing pops out.
Right.
And but usually I use for vocals when recording a singer or any kind of artist. Here I have a Knif mic, which is actually a Finnish brand. So it's this guy called Jonte Knif, who's from Helsinki, who makes like different tube equipment, and he has like this crazy looking mic. You can look it up at Knif Audio. So it's knifaudio.com. And it looks like something from Rivendell from Lord of the Rings, like an elvish mic.
Well, now I want one, and I know Bandrew Scott from Podcastage. He wants to review one, so definitely hook one up for Bandrew.
Oh, awesome! Definitely will.
So, what's the model of that mic that you have?
He has. It's only one model, but you can actually ask for between two different capsules in it.
Oh,
so he has like, I'm using the one that's more closer to. I think it's the one that's closer to a U67, like Neumann U67 capsule, but you can also get one in C12 form. So the model is K804, and I think that has to do with the tube, probably.
Yeah. Oh, K804. Okay. Wow. Yeah. Oh man. I wish I won the lottery. I would just be trying microphones all day long, and of course plugins and all that.
I tried a lot of microphones before I ended up with this one, and yeah, I'm really content with it. Like, it works on so many vocalists, and yeah, it's difficult to find a mic like that.
Right. So you're using the Apollo 8P from Universal Audio, which is an interface which actually runs plugins. It has plugin processing on the unit itself, correct?
Yeah. This one has 4 cores of DSP processing, like processors on it. So it's 4 cores that's able to run the plugins on it. So my own laptop doesn't need to use its processor for those plugins. And it's real time through it. So no latency.
So you're using the precision channel strip, but you're also using the distressor. Isn't the distressor something? I haven't used it much. Isn't that something where you can like distort it for distortion?
Yeah, I think, or maybe the ones you're thinking about are the Fatsos, maybe. Also Empirical Labs, but Distressor definitely has a sound with some distortion. Definitely has some distortion that I actually like a lot.
Okay, and you're just adding a tiny bit of it, right?
Yeah, a tiny bit. So it's actually leveling, and I use mine with like 0 attack, so the fastest attack possible.
Okay.
And so depending on what volume I'm using, especially with the singer, that switches. So I'm using that mainly for monitoring. I might not use it for the mixing, but it's kind of leveling it, the sound going in.
Right.
So the rest of the compressors are doing pretty much the same, but depending on what level it's going in, the distressor is going to put it on a certain level.
Okay.
So that all the plugins after that one is doing pretty much the same.
Got it. And so it adds saturation as well, right? And then if you crank it up, it becomes distortion. Is that how it works?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay. And it's something. Yeah, it's a good kind of distortion. I mean, many use it on snare drums and stuff like that because of that distortion.
Oh.
Because it makes the snare attack like fatter,
a little gritty too.
Yeah, gritty, and the transients becomes like more thick, and so it punches harder in that sense.
All right, I got to get out my snare drum now. It's actually in the closet. Can you believe I don't have my drum set up? Is that a tragedy? All right.
In a podcast studio?
That's true. That's why I don't have it set up, but
that could be cool.
Right? All right. Well, okay, so and you're producing audio, and that's so cool that you have that mic, the knifaudio.com.
Yeah,
I'm going to go check that out.
That's cool, yeah. He has a lot of crazy equipment. He has like a synth that has like 12 or maybe even 20 tubes in it.
Whoa.
It costs like 16 grand or something, but it's crazy.
All right, so then how long have you been with oeksound?
The company started, or Olli, the founder, started the company in late 2016. He had already, when he released the first version of Soothe, and then back then it was only him. So he made the plugin. The plugin took him about 3 years to make.
Wow.
So yeah, and on his own. So I mean, you have no one, like he had no one helping him out like that, or different mentors, of course, and teachers and educators, but he's pretty much a self-taught programmer.
Right.
He hasn't gone to school for programming or anything like that. So, and I think that's also kind of a reason why he was able to figure something like Soothe out, because I guess, I'm not sure. I haven't gone to any kind of programming class or something like that, but I think they kind of like build on rules and following certain rules. And if you haven't gone to school like that, you probably don't know about the rules. Or if you know about them, you don't know why you should follow them.
Right.
So you maybe go and break some of those rules. Then you kind of like figure out something like Soothe. So late 2016, he released that, and it got some great review, like first impressions on Gearsluts, which is usually the place to go when if you're making a plugin on your own, the online forum.
Right.
And people started kind of like raving about it there. This was really, really small scale back then. And I had lunch with him. We actually went, so this is when we're both in school at university, at the school called the Sibelius Academy here in Helsinki. It's school mainly aimed at classical music, and but also has like music technology and jazz and other stuff. But it's kind of like our Juilliard in that sense.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so we had lunch, and he talked about like how he's trying to. Of course, there was a bunch of bugs that he needed fixing, and he was the only one. Like, of course, he tried. He was completely swamped
Right.
with trying to fix everything for everyone, and at the same time, he wanted to reach more people. And I said that, well, you shouldn't be the one that does that all of that stuff. You're the programmer. You're the one. You're the inventor.
Right.
You already did your job. I mean, your job is done. You spent 3 years creating this one. So, I mean, you should like try and hire someone that does it. And the second time I said it, he suggested that I come along and help out with stuff. And I didn't know anything about like marketing in that sense, but I kind of like educated myself on it. And then I jumped on, and it seems to have gone well, because it's kind of like I kind of like am the customer in this sense.
Right.
And I know exactly like what I would want from a plugin company. And so I'm not thinking from the market perspective. I'm more thinking about our products as a user.
Yeah.
And that does help. So I joined 4 months after, or right about April 2017.
Okay.
So,
yeah, that's awesome that you can do. You're doing the marketing, among other things, I'm sure, but you're doing the marketing, but you have this background as an audio engineer and a songwriter and a producer. So it's a perfect combination. It's better than it's way better than the opposite, which would be hire a marketing person and try to teach them audio. It doesn't.
Yeah.
That would never work.
It definitely is like a big part of our brand, because, I mean, we already had it. It was very clear for us when we begun that we don't want to. You shouldn't, with a plugin like Soothe or Spiff, you shouldn't try to force anyone to buy it. I mean, if you try it and you don't understand it or you don't like it, then why should you buy it? It's like, and I'm the marketing manager saying this.
Right.
It's like there's no point if you don't understand the plugin that you're using. Why would you buy it?
Exactly.
It's like there's no sense there. So, yeah, the whole strategy to begin with was a lot about having people trying it out and educating people, and then my main quest began like to become this, that we needed high profile users, like high profile mixing engineers and mastering engineers to try it, and then we know if we're onto something. Right. And of course, a lot of people liked it a lot and started talking, and that's our marketing strategy. I mean, people talk, and everybody loves to talk about plugins. That's why we're here. I mean, we love talking about plugins.
Exactly. Yeah. That's awesome. I can't remember where I heard about Soothe. It might have been from one of Dave Pensado's videos on YouTube.
Awesome. Great. Yeah, that was something I was really happy that I managed to get to at one point. So it's always nice when you hear someone hearing about our products for something that I've like worked so hard to get out or like strived for. Yeah. And it's like, oh yes, there was it worked.
Worth it. Yeah. So Barry is here with me, my sidekick. He's on mic. Barry, get on your mic. You Barry, you like Soothe, right?
Oh, forget it.
I know, right? And so I mean, I know you love it, but would you ever consider, not using it? Would you ever consider taking it off, deleting it from your computer?
No way. You crazy?
No. All right. Well, okay. Well, Barry likes Soothe. So let's get into Soothe now. I mean, here's the thing. As most the faithful listeners of this show will know, and anyone who's producing podcast audio will know, that a lot of the audio we record in podcasting is with guests who have terrible microphones, terrible rooms, terrible everything. Everything's terrible mic technique. And so we end up having to fix a lot of stuff. Now, Soothe, and by the way, Soothe originally came out a few years ago, and now you did a huge revamp about, 4-6 months ago, and now it's called soothe2.
Yeah, in January actually. So.
Oh, January, yeah. So 3-4 months ago. So, and I had the original, and then I upgraded to soothe2, and it really is even better. I was so happy that it was better. I was like, because I was hoping it wasn't just, change the colors and make it look nicer. But
we were all very happy that it is better. Yeah,
it really is better. It's so cool. Anyway, so we end up fixing a lot of audio, and because people have the wrong microphones, a lot of times there's sibilance. And sibilance is nasty when it's really harsh, and it can hurt your ears. It can almost be like painful, like make people turn off the podcast. That's how painful it can be sometimes. Yeah. So Soothe is great, and by the way, the name is perfect, right? You could not have picked a better name for this thing.
Yeah, it's true. I think it actually it does explain what it does.
Like, wow, did you name it, or did the founder?
No, it's Olli had it. I mean, Olli is a genius when it comes to like just branding in general, or just kind of like anything outwards, kind of branding in a sense. Right. I think so. He has a way with names and
nice.
And the user interface, and is most of it is his idea, and or something that he started, and so. Right. Yeah, if you feel like it's easy to use, you also have him to thank about that. So.
Oh, good. So let's talk about it. So in general, talk about what Soothe does. I know because it tames some things and all that. So give us the overview. Yeah.
So what we usually call it is a dynamic resonance suppressor. So if we kind of split that up, so in sound we have resonances, and resonances can be a good thing if they are like overtones, for example, but some resonances can be harsh for the ear. And as you talked, one of those resonances could be sibilance that occur in S's and anything like that. Right. But it can also be something that comes from a cheap mic. And a cheap mic might have a certain frequency that just like spikes out and just kind of like cuts into your ear.
Right.
And like that kind of a harsh resonance. And usually it doesn't have to be a bad mic. It can also be a really, really good mic in a sense, but just a bad pairing. So it's the wrong mic. It's not the bad mic, but it's the wrong mic for that person.
That voice, yeah.
For that voice, because different voices have completely different overtone series and sibilance and their S's. I mean, my S is a lot higher than probably than Americans, because I'm from the Scandinavia and the Nordics, and you have a lower S, so your S is going to be lower than mine, and stuff like that. So
lower meaning frequency?
In frequency wise, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So mine is probably 2,000 hertz higher or 4,000 hertz higher.
Why? Because of the accent or the way you pronounce it?
My mother tongue is Swedish, so so our natural S is higher, just in pitch. Just it's a lot more front in the mouth, and a lot broader in the mouth as well.
Got it.
But yeah, I think so. What you usually do to tame these resonances is you use an EQ, and you notch it out with sharp Q, and probably a lot of gain down on a certain frequency. So I mean, where our ears are usually the most kind of susceptible for resonances is around like 3,700 hertz, for example. It's like really, really harsh. If something is harsh there, it's gonna really hurt in your ear. So I might go with an EQ and notch out 6 dB in 3.7 hertz, but that's gonna be a permanent like fix for that. and I might not need it to be permanent.
Right.
In that sense, it's going to color the sound even when I don't need it. And
Right,
it might
so-
be a bad thing.
Right, permanent meaning it affects the entire length of the track. So
Yeah.
at some points of the track, that 3,700 hertz might be harsh, and it's good that you removed it. But on other parts of the track,
It's probably the most important frequency that is there. So I
Right.
mean, that's usually for a vocal in a mix, for example, it's usually the most important area.
Right.
That like 1 through 4K.
totally.
And so, I mean, usually if you want something that's not permanent, then you go and grab a dynamic EQ.
Right.
So then you choose your frequency, and then you choose how much it should cut out, and then you can choose a threshold. So it works like a compressor over that area, and then it's gonna cut it out for that. But then again, depending on how far away from the mic I am, or if I'm moving my head a bit, that resonance is probably gonna like jump around.
Yeah, shift.
And probably I need different thresholds for different parts, and I also need to change the frequency up and down a bit maybe, and stuff like that. And that takes a lot of automation. And the thing is that what Olli heard about producers and engineers doing when he got the idea of this plugin is, and that something that he had done as well, is like vocal recordings. You go through word by word, and you go and notch out resonances, harsh resonances in a word. So, and you can do this by like per syllable
Oh my God.
bass. And if you've ever done that, and if you're kind of like this kind of OCD producer
Right.
that needs everything to be perfect, then that's there's like 4 hours of work at least going into one lead vocal.
Right.
And and so what Soothe does is does that all for you in a sense automatically. And you don't need to do that on your own. And it also kind of probably does it with more precision than a human would do it, because it just listens to the incoming signal and applies the reduction where it happens and when it happens.
Right.
And then if it doesn't happen, then it's not touching it. So it's actually not a plugin that does a lot. It's actually a plugin that's extremely transparent and only works when it needs to.
Right.
And I think that's extremely important to note when you're using it, that you're not supposed to get a sound out of it. You're supposed to just clean up whatever you have.
Yeah, and so it's almost like, so if there's a recorded track that has sibilance, and you could even use a de-esser, but even a de-esser is sort of like a multi-band compressor in that frequency range, and so that's okay too. But Soothe, like you said, it monitors the frequencies, and if, let's say, 3,700 gets really loud at some point, it'll soothe that, it'll push it down a little. But then maybe if they turn their head, maybe the frequency is 3,100 hertz, and so then Soothe will, if 3,100 spikes up, Soothe will bring that down. And so it's like an intelligent de-esser. That's how I use it. But it's more than a de-esser, because I think now in Soothe 2 you can actually you can do all the frequencies from 20 hertz to 20K, right?
Yeah, that was like probably one of the biggest upgrades. Or of course, from Soothe 1 to Soothe 2, we probably completely redid the whole thing, because after like a few years of experience, you noticed that we could actually have done this whole thing even better.
Right.
So we went ahead and just like rewrote the whole thing.
Right.
And I mean the reception we've had so far is that it actually became really good. So yes, it's full frequency down to 20 hertz now, which means that you can also, if you want, manage proximity. If we're talking about like podcast stuff right now, so you can actually have it carve out proximity. So if someone is going closer to the mic and you get more of the lower frequencies, or if someone is going back, it's gonna live together with what the speaker is doing, in a sense.
Right.
So I would probably use just target the lower frequencies then with the EQ section of the plugin, and then probably use a slower release in that sense. We can go through the parameters if people want to know how many different ways you can use it. There's a lot.
Yeah, that's great. So again, for podcast production, it's mainly using Soothe 2 as a de-esser in, probably, anywhere from 2 or 3K and above, something like that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we can go through some of the parameter controls, and so because no one's really going to be able to see this, we shouldn't really get too far into it. But obviously, there's a big knob that says depth, and the depth is how aggressive you want soothe to be.
Yeah, it's really, we tried to make it extremely clear and simple. So when opening up the plugin, you're going to see kind of something that looks like an EQ, but actually isn't an EQ. So you might think that it is, but what you should focus your eyes on is just the big knob that says depth. And that's the one you want to touch first. You want to pull that up because that's going to make it do more. And if you drag it down, that's going to make it do less.
Right.
And that way you can hear what it's doing. But right in the beginning, if you want to kind of get to know both of our plugins, actually, Soothe and Spiff, the best way to get to know what they're reacting to is to find the delta button that says delta. It's it's down.
Yes, I love this button.
Yeah, because that way, it's as soon as you find that, it's gonna make sense. Like everything is gonna make sense.
Yeah. So the delta button actually lets you hear what soothe is removing.
Exactly.
Which is awesome. So you can hear what it's removing. So if you're going to use it as a de-esser like I do, when you hit the delta button, all you hear, if you're only using the band in that frequency range of sibilance, all you're going to hear is the sibilance. And so what you want to do with the delta button in, you want to adjust the other parameters so that the sibilance sounds as nasty as you can get it to sound.
Exactly. So while you're in delta, you kind of want to find the nasty stuff,
right?
And adjust all the parameters so that you hear as much bad stuff as possible.
Yeah.
And then you pull down the depth again, the big knob, and then you put it out of delta, and then you turn it up again until the bad noise, the bad stuff is gone.
Right.
So that's kind of like the go-to way to using Soothe.
Yeah, because what you're doing with the delta is you're identifying the nasty part, and then with the depth, that's how you remove more or less of it. And one thing I would like that just came to mind is that even when you find nasty frequencies, like nasty sibilance, it's sort of like an amateur mistake is to remove too much of it. So
yeah, definitely.
And again, in the beginning, it's okay. You got to go nuts and learn. But what I've found is, you might, after you find the bad frequencies or the bad sibilance, and then remove as much as you think, and then I always just back off of it a little more.
Yeah, I usually do that, or then I go crazy and make it sound dull in a sense, and then I turn back the mix knob, which introduces the dry signal again.
Oh, right.
Back to it. So they actually work very similarly. So yeah, both ways are perfect ways of using it. So definitely kind of like just backing off the depth a bit, or then just backing off the mix. So you go down from 100 to maybe 60. That means you're going to have 40% of the untouched signal and 60% of the soothed signal.
Right. Yeah, that's actually one parameter. I've never messed with the mix. I almost forgot that it was there.
Yeah, I think we introduced it. No, we actually had it in the first version, but a lot of mixing engineers like doing stuff in parallel, especially when you have something that's extremely processed already.
Right.
And there's gone so much thought into it. So I think Josh Goodwin, who's a mixing engineer that does the Dua Lipa stuff, or at least the latest album has a few songs of the singles at least. So he uses Soothe constantly with actually a quite low mix, like between 40 and 60.
Oh.
And so he's mainly using it as like a safety in a sense, because when you get Dua Lipa's vocals, there's gone some thought into it, how they sound. So you don't want to like mess with it completely. You just want to make sure that nothing stands out.
Right. And that's a great thing about plugins that have the mix option, meaning the dry wet mix, is when you when you use some, like you said, between 40 and 60% or something, you what you do is you're maintaining some of the naturalness of the original signal, but then you're also benefiting from the processing of that plugin. And it's just finding that happy medium that can really, you can fix the problem and have it still sound natural at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Usually you need to train your ears first to kind of know when you're doing too much. And before you get there, it's a good way to just do it until you hear it and then back off a bit.
Right.
For example, with the mix knob.
Okay, I have a question, and this is going to turn into like as if I called the oeksound help desk. So right on the top left of the plugin, there's a soft and hard toggle. Basically, you can, and I always use soft. I don't think I've ever tried hard. What's the difference between soft and hard?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and we thought so hard about what we would call them.
By the way, Ralph M. Rivera has to drink now. We said those two words. So anyway, go ahead.
So it was really like difficult figuring out what we would call them. But I think soft and hard is actually were the best names for it. So because we didn't do just the same thing, the same algorithm, but just more and less.
Okay.
It's actually smarter and more focused. So soft is like a smarter mode. Soft mode is really difficult to overdo the soft mode.
Okay.
You're not going to get a lot of artifacts. You're not going to get a lot of the. It sounds a bit like or something like that. It's a weird sound when you overdo soothe, like really, really crank it.
Right.
So we wanted a mode that's really difficult to do to get the wrong results in. And then we created the hard mode when you don't feel like soft mode is doing enough.
Oh.
And you really want to hone in on a problem. For example, a certain sibilance that just won't go away with the soft mode.
Okay.
Then you can kind of like put it into hard mode, and that means that it's going to crank it and the depth is going to do a lot more. But usually you need to mess with the other parameters a bit more before you get the result you want. So it's kind of like the expert mode of soothe2. And usually 90% of the time, soft mode is going to do the trick.
Right.
So how you've used it is probably correct because there isn't a lot of cases where you actually would need to use the hard mode. And if you use the hard mode, then you probably are going to use it on something that's not that prominent in a mix, for example, like cymbals or something like that. Something that's really kind of noise related maybe. So soft mode is intelligent. It knows what it wants. You don't need to mess a lot with the other parameters. It's going to find your problems and it's going to notch out those resonances. And then hard mode is when you have something that, when you feel like it's not doing enough.
Right.
Or if you want to be really, really specific about how much it does and when and where.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so, yeah, there have been times when I've been using soothe2 and I'll turn up the depth to remove more of the sibilance, but then it's too much, so I turn it back down, but then the certain sibilance just pokes out at me. And I was wondering if I put it into hard mode, then will it sort of crush down in this case, sibilance even harder?
Yeah, definitely it's going to notch more. And especially if you're using the EQ section to kind of like if you drag up that frequency, it's going to focus more on it.
Right.
So especially in hard mode, it's going to be even more more
aggressive.
When you kind of like drag aggressive in that. Yeah, exactly in that area. So yeah, definitely try it on some nasty sibilance because that's probably going to be a good way to use it. And in that sense, I would also use the other parameters that you have beneath the depth knob is sharpness and selectivity.
Yes.
And sharpness.
I was going to ask you about these two because these two are very important, right? This is like Besides the depth, obviously, the depth is how much of the effect you want to use. Besides that, I think these two, sharpness and selectivity, are the two most important. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I definitely think so. And different people use them in completely different ways. Like a really famous producer called Eric Valentine I've seen him use Soothe, and he uses the sharpness on mostly on 10, like full sharpness. I can not imagine like how or like why. In my ears, I start to hear like artifacts if I use the highest sharpness, because then you suddenly have, so how it looks for the user is like if you pull up the sharpness, all the notches that Soothe are creating, Soothe can create maybe up to 2,000 notches at the same time in your audio. So, I mean, what EQ does that? And how does it sound? So it's a bit artificial in my ear. But depending on how noisy the material is, for example, cymbals and sibilants, I think higher sharpness could work there definitely, because it's more noise and less harmonic, the material. But then if you want it to work more as an EQ or more as 200 EQs, then you can use a lower sharpness, because then the Q values of each notch is going to be more musical in a sense. I think that's the best way to explain the sharpness and when to use what sharpness level in that sense. Yeah,
the sharpness is interesting. Yeah, when you do crank it up and then you crank up the amount of the effect, you can see like it looks like hundreds of these tiny little notches, and it almost sounds like a comb filter. It just starts to sound a little unnatural.
You're effectively just killing off all the harmonic content in your audio. So yeah, definitely need to be careful with that.
Right. So yeah, I think in my standard settings, which I pull up as like a baseline settings for my soothe2, I actually just have the sharpness on 5, which is halfway, and I also have the selectivity on 5, which is halfway.
Yeah. Those should work really well. I mean, we've tried to make the parameters so that in the middle you get the best starting point for any case, and also the factory default preset that we made should be the go-to like starting point, and that's a lot about like the user experience that we're getting. Is that yes, it can be complex to use if you want it to be complex to use, but we're not trying to make it complex. And usually you only need to adjust the depth and maybe the EQ section, or focus in on pressing the delta and focusing in on a specific area.
Right. You know, one thing I did not do after I upgraded to soothe2, I didn't go back into the presets that you guys offer. There's a lot of presets now: acoustic guitar, bass, drums, electric guitar, master, orchestral, piano, sound design, synth, and of course vocals. And inside of vocals, you have, there's like 15, and one is called invisible de-esser. Then there's a vocal de-esser. There's a vocal harshness ultra, a vocal warmer. Man, I didn't even try any of these.
Well, they're quite similar then again. I mean, depending on the material. I mean, they're really worth like going through if you have a material and you just quickly want to check if you get closer to a good result. So yeah, definitely go and try them. And the presets we actually made together with a lot of the big names in the music industry, like engineers, and you can see their names next to the presets. And so we're really thankful that they were able to actually use the plugin before we released it and made some cool presets out of it and sent them to us.
Yeah. Dave Pensato, Joe Ciccarelli, Greg Wells.
Yeah.
Bob Mack.
They're all users,
Man. Yeah, this is serious. Okay, so that's the sharpness is how sharp the notching is in general. And so selectivity, what is that?
Selectivity, yeah. I would probably, the easiest way to explain is that it's how many notches it applies, in a sense. So if it's more selective, it applies less notches, and if it's less selective, then it's going to apply notches all over, or more as soon as it feels like something might be a problem, it's going to apply a notch there.
Oh, I see.
But if you only want to focus on really bad harshness, then you might use a higher selectivity for that.
I
to
see.
make sure.
Yeah.
But usually you need to kind of like see or use the delta button and kind of mess around with it a bit to get it. But I would, as you do, I would probably keep it somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, although I just pulled up the preset called Invisible De-esser, and the selectivity's all the way at 0.
Yeah.
And I think what I was wanting was instead of having my selectivity at 5, like in the middle between 0 and 10, I think I do want it closer to 0 or 1 or 2 or something.
Yeah, that's true. I actually, when I use it, I probably find myself more often with a very low selectivity because in that sense, it feels like it knows what it's doing, and I've started to trust Soothe that much that I kind of trust it to do intelligent like fixes. So yeah, I definitely also go probably under 3 or 4 on the selectivity.
Okay, and you also have side chain functionality here, so that obviously you can pipe in a different signal and have have Soothe react to the other signal, but apply Soothe to the other signal.
Yeah, it's so, that's mind-boggling, that feature.
Right.
We kind of like put it there because we knew how, and people had asked us to do it.
Right.
And I have probably like 5 different ways to use that feature, but it's nowhere near the amount of possibilities that you can use it in. And so I'm really psyched to see how people are going to use it and show off how they've used it. One way I used it in vocal production, when I record, when I have, for example, a ballad and a big reverb behind the vocal. So you can also use Soothe in mid-side mode, which is very welcome for a lot of mastering engineers. But for example, on a vocal in a ballad with a big reverb, I have it in mid-side mode, but I'm only targeting the mid channel, or mostly the mid channel. And I'm carving out the vocal from the reverb. So I'm having Soothe on the reverb return.
Right.
And when the singer is active, it's carving out space for the vocal in the reverb, in this huge reverb. And as soon as the vocal stops, the mid channel of the reverb comes back. Yeah, but what it's carving out is not just volume, it's like a footprint of the vocal.
Right.
In the mid channel. So it's kind of carves out this perfect space for the vocal in that reverb. And I would usually use slower times on that, like slower attack and slower release. Yeah, because then it's more really cool natural.
Trick. Yeah, more natural, right?
Yeah, I would really recommend like people trying that out because I've used it and I really like it.
By the way, my wife is running the blender upstairs. Can you hear that? Can anyone hear that?
I can't hear that. At least.
Barry, get on the mic. Can you hear the blender?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right. And what do you think about the blender in terms of the fact that I'm recording audio right now, and it's the blender's going to get into my audio?
That's frightening.
I know, that's frightening, dude. Anyway, so all right, so that's the side chain, and then you have and anyway, there's a lot more we could talk about in terms of the nodes because on the right side there's a whole. You could see all the frequencies. That's where you see the level, and that's where you can adjust where you're using it. For instance, if you're going to use it as a de-esser, you can use it from like 3 or 4K and above, sort of thing. And so, in terms of lower, obviously using this as a de-esser is a no-brainer. But what about the lower frequencies? Like, what are people using soothe2 for in the lower frequencies?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people using it to carve out like low mid rumble in master, like even on master channels. So the way I've used it is if I recorded a lot of strings, for example, so maybe an ensemble on 16 strings or something like that. There's a lot of low mid buildup that's that occurs when you mic something close, especially.
Right.
So you have a lot of spot mics on a lot of different instruments. So that's going to build up a lot of information in the low frequency area. So that's not something I want to kind of address permanently with an EQ, because if I have 4 strings playing and then suddenly 16 strings playing, I don't want those 4 strings, when they're solo, to sound bad. I don't want them to sound like they don't have any body.
Right.
So I want them to keep their body. So I put soothe maybe even on the aux on the group for the whole string package in that sense.
Right.
Then I focus soothe on the low frequency range, use a broad sharpness and a slower attack and release. And then that way, when those 16 strings come in, it's going to start and attenuate that area for me. So,
Right.
And that way, it sounds very, very natural when you switched from a lot of close mic instruments to fewer close mic instruments. That's one. But then, of course, especially as I mentioned in podcasts and stuff like that, the proximity effect, like just working with that and making sure that it doesn't get, you don't overwhelm the low end. That's also a good way to use it.
Yeah, that makes sense. And one of the other controls here is quality in the plugin on soothe2, where you can, the oversampling you have from 1x, 2x, or 4x oversampling. And then for resolution, you have normal, high, and ultra. And you also have eco, which is, I guess, the economy. Yeah. So what is the oversampling and the resolution exactly?
Yeah, the oversampling, that's easier to explain. So start off with that. Oversampling pretty much, so if you're running your audio, if you're recording in 48 kilohertz as a sample rate,
right.
If you oversample within Soothe, it's going to sample up your audio to a higher sample rate before applying the processing and playing it back.
Right.
So if you're in 48 and you have 2 times oversampling, then the processing is going to get applied on a 96 kilohertz sample rate, in a sense.
Right.
And then it's going to sample it down again, and then you're back in 48. But that means that the processing is a lot cleaner, in a sense.
Right.
And of
less
course,
artifacts. Yeah.
Less artifacts, and it's going to sound more precise. And then we have resolution, which if the oversampling was on the frequency range, kind of like which sample rate you have, then the resolution is on the sample range, so the timing. So with a higher resolution, Soothe knows a lot better when the resonance occurs.
Oh.
So the oversampling is where the resonance occurs, and the resolution is when it occurs. So it knows kind of a lot more exact in when it needs to start doing a notch and when it needs to stop. But we're talking about like very, very tiny increments here. It's not like milliseconds here and there. We're talking about samples here and there. But I would recommend a higher resolution when handling stuff in the bass region or lower mid, because that's more sensitive to timing.
Interesting.
Yeah, those are the quality controls. Of course, I mean, I very seldom go over 2 and high, 2 oversample and high resolution. So, and usually I only use that on really important material. But yeah, usually you get a long way with just the basic settings.
Yeah, I don't know. I just, when I have a chance, like I just put it on. I just put everything up as high as it'll go. So the oversampling to 4x and the resolution to ultra. I mean, why not? Like so rendering might take a little longer, but that's it, right?
Yeah. I mean, especially if you're doing something like podcast where you might have, 4 tracks or maybe a few more, but no problem. They're using a higher sample, higher oversampling.
Yeah, and the reason you said that is because of music. If you had 100 tracks, then if you tried to use 4x ultra on everything, it would be a problem.
Yeah, usually the problem comes in when you have kind of like a vocal package with like 48 vocal tracks and 6 or maybe 60 if you do like a choir in your studio where you have every single vocalist recorded separately, stuff like that. So yeah, big sessions you don't want to start using oversampling on big sessions like that.
Right.
But then you might want to render it, and then you can use the offline quality settings. And
Right.
that lets you kind of like use Audio Suite or a similar feature on your DAW to kind of render with the higher settings. But then when you listen back through it, it only uses the lower ones.
Right.
So when you bounce, it's going to use your higher settings.
Yeah, that's very cool. That's very cool. All right, so Soothe, it rocks. I don't know. This is one of the like here's the thing. I try a lot of different plugins and because I just love doing it. And so a lot of plugins I'll try and I'll like it and I'll be like, "Oh, this is cool." And I'll use it like, 2 times, 3 times, 5 times, and then it just doesn't feel like, then I sort of realize that it's good, but it's nothing amazing. It's good, but okay. But Soothe is not like that. Soothe is like, I use it all the time and I love it all the time. Like it doesn't just fade away into one of these plugins like, oh yeah, it's just another plugin. It never does that. So it's very cool.
Cool.
So Spiff is your other plugin, and this one, as I mentioned, I don't, in fact, I use this very rarely, but I had to buy it just to, first of all, support what you guys are doing. And there are some uses for it. But Spiff is a transient shaper, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. And so it's interesting. It has a similar layout, it's similar look and feel as Soothe. But it's much different. And so transients are how would you describe transients? Hannes?
Transients. I think the really technical or the really easiest way to do it, but still keeping it on a technical level, is that a transient is a sudden change in amplitude, a sudden change in volume,
Like a spike.
a spike of any kind.
Right. That's
so
a
when you go,
transient.
so when you go from let's say like minus 20 dB to minus 10 dB over 3 samples, or let's say 1 millisecond, that's going to look like a transient for this plugin.
Right.
Or it's going to sound like a transient to begin with. So a transient can be, the easiest way to think about transients is drums, percussion, anything with a lot of rhythm are going to have a lot of transients. Right. If you think about a guitar playing a rhythm, then the transient is going to come from the pick on the strings.
Right.
And that's going to create the transient. But then what you hear, the chord you hear, is going to be the harmonic material. It's not going to be the transient material.
Right.
So yeah, a strumming guitar is made up of the transient material, that's the pick hitting the strings, and then the harmonic material, which is the chord that you hear.
Right. And for the human voice, the transient, even the word transient, the T, transient is the first T is a transient, right?
Definitely. So consonants and pretty much all of our consonants, like
all
K,
the consonants.
T, G, B.
B, everything. And so one of the cool, and I don't know who figured this out, this whole idea of a transient shaper, but the whole idea is that you can, using a plugin like Spiff, and Spiff is just great at this, you can actually adjust the transients of the sound and not really touch the rest of it. Is that correct?
Exactly, yeah. So for example, in my guitar example, you can bring out the rhythmical aspect of that sound. So you can bring out the pick attack. So you can much clearer hear the rhythm that guitar is playing without actually raising the volume of those chords.
Right.
Because you might have too much of it. For example, if you play like a funk guitar, electric guitar lick or something like that, usually you want the rhythm of it, but you don't want to hear the harmonic material that much because you probably have 5 other instruments playing that same harmonic material.
Right.
But then on vocals, for example, so with Spiff, you can both cut and boost this transient material. And I like to think of it as pushing stuff back in the mix or pushing things forward in the mix, because transients is going to get your sound closer to the listener. So if you have a lot of transients, it's going to sound closer to you. And if you have less transients, it's going to push it away from the listener. So on a vocal, for example, I the one I use the most with spiff is preset called remove mouth clicks. And that's really helpful when you have like a really overcompressed vocal and an artist that, I don't know, is trying to be Billie Eilish and is pretty much eating up the mic, like is so close to the mic that the lips are touching the pop filter and the pop filter is touching the mic. Hopefully they have a pop filter. Right. So, I mean, there's so much small noises going on in your mouth with your lips and your tongue and everything that, yeah, I think probably most listeners know what ASMR is. So that's the stuff. So you can either, with spiff, you can take that away from the vocal. But of course, if you're an ASMR artist, then you can actually boost that as well.
Right.
And so I do, recommend you try that out. So the preset is called Remove Mouth Clicks. So that's actually going to attenuate a lot of those clicks and pops that happen.
And this is the use that I use it for in podcast production, is to remove mouth clicks. But
awesome.
But the question I have is, so just one single mouth click is on the wave, on the wave on the screen. You could see a little mouth click. It's like a little transient. It's like beep. But then, like, I'm talking now, and I am saying words with transients, right? I mean, there's transients all over the place when I'm talking. So how does spiff know what is a mouth click and what is just my normal transients on a word that I'm speaking?
Well, of course, it's also going to affect some of those of your consonant sounds. Okay. But it's mostly everything that goes over a certain level, so that it keeps it level. It's like a really intelligent compressor in that sense over that area. Okay. So, and of course, it's spiff doesn't care about like at what level you're going into it. So it's level independent in that sense. So when you're talking normally with your normal volume and those mouth clicks appear on top of that, it's still going to see those as transients, like as the same kind of transients as it does when you whisper into the mic.
Right.
So it's still going to kind of hear it.
Got it.
The same way. And that's kind of, I think, one of the best things about spiff that not many transient processors has, is that it's extremely detailed. And the same way as with the soothe, that you can put into delta and find that like annoying material or the good material, because with spiff you can boost stuff as well. So if you want to boost a really good like rhythm in something, or in a rap vocal, if you want to make it really clear what the rapper is saying or rapping, then using spiff in boost mode and having all those consonants hitting equally well,
right?
Then that's a good way to use it.
Yeah, and I was just going to say that, because sometimes when we record podcasts, someone will join, like a guest will join a podcast from like Skype or Zoom or some other horrible. Actually, Skype is worse than Zoom, but they'll just join and let's use Skype as an example, because Skype just absolutely decimates the quality of the audio.
I haven't used that in a while.
Oh man. But anyway, some people who join on Skype, actually some people sound fine, but that's the minority of people. It's just most people sound very dull and crushed. So if someone is joining on Skype and it sounds dull, and maybe their transients are maybe it's being limited so hard that the transients are missing, that's when I use the boost in spiff. So I'll try on a crappy recording, I'll try to add some more transients to make it sound more clear.
Yeah. That's definitely a good way to use it. Yeah, I definitely used it like that, or someone that doesn't really that might mumble some of the consonants so that they're there, but it's not clear, like that they're there. So then before I go into a compressor, then I usually boost a bit those transients, and then I go ahead then and take it down again with a compressor, because that way I can level it out. So I take down the worst one, or the ones that go over a certain threshold, but boost the ones that aren't exciting enough, for example. Kind of using it as an exciter in that sense, which is another kind of plugin in that sense.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And there's another, in spiff here, there's another preset called Rap Vocal in Your Face.
Yeah,
So I think, Barry, do you think Ralph would like that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I know. And Barry, have you heard Ralph's podcast lately? He hasn't put out an episode? Well, what about the last episode he put out? What were your feelings on Ralph M. Rivera's last episode?
There's no activity, no giggle, no nothing.
There's no giggle or no nothing. I know. Well, all right, Barry, I'll tell Ralph you said that. Maybe he'll hear it on the show. So Hannes, we talked about soothe2, we talked about spiff. What is next for you guys?
Whew. Yeah, well, there's a lot going on. We kind of we knew we had something with Soothe, and when we released it, and also with spiff, but just the amount of love that we received so far has been overwhelming, and we're really thankful for all our users supporting us, and also supporting us through like this upgrade, which was of course a lot of work for us, like for all of our programmers spent 2 years just like recreating Soothe and just trying to make sure that we get it right. So of course with Soothe there are a lot of different possibilities with an algorithm like that, and so we try to. Right now we're definitely focusing on figuring out in what directions we can take that technology now that we have it and now that it works as well as it does.
Right.
Because you can turn it into a few different things on the plugin side.
Right.
And different kind of processing. But also just Soothe as it works right now, it works well when you kind of post-process podcasts. But
right.
You're probably not using Soothe right now on your channel.
Correct, not live, right.
Yeah. So, maybe.
Oh, I see. Wait a minute. I know I'm slow, but I'm not that slow. Okay.
Exactly. So that's something we're definitely looking into because that would, of course, open up a huge amount of possibilities.
Right.
On, live broadcast.
Oh, yeah. Streaming, everything.
Yeah. So it's extremely important for us, and now that we kind of know that we have it right, it makes sense to just try and work on it as much as possible. But we have I know that Olli is working on has a few different plugin ideas up his sleeve, and Tommy, who's the lead programmer behind Spiff, also has some different ideas, and of course is also working on making Spiff better in a sense. That's because I like it as it is, and I don't know what could be better, but according to him and Olli, there's some stuff that could be different. So let's see what happens.
That's exciting. Well, in all my travels and experience producing podcast audio over the last 8 years, I have a bunch of plugins that I really love, and I always I have this vision, which will never happen for me anyway, of coming up with one sort of a master plugin for podcasters where it incorporates a bunch of these other cool plugins, and then it has everything in one place, and it could, but again,
nice. That's a good idea.
It's okay, but it's not, I don't think it's practical because there's, again, with podcasting, the variation in quality of audio that we record is so vast. I mean, you got guys with great setups, like you have a great setup. You sound great. Other people, it's the worst sound you've heard in the world. And so I don't think there's a way to make one plugin to handle all that, right?
That would be a difficult task.
So, but Hannes Andersson, this has been great, man. I want everyone, the link's in the show notes. Everyone can go to oeksound.com and check out Spiff and soothe2. I know, for instance, in podcast engineering school, as part of my school, I talk about Soothe and how great it is, and that, and I also mentioned FabFilter's de-esser as well, because that's a great de-esser too. But
love that as well.
So thanks, man. This was fun.
Yeah, and for anyone listening, you don't need to buy the plugins to try them. We do 20-day trials, so without any restrictions. So you can stock up on all your podcasts and then run it through soothe during 20 days.
Nice.
And then you're gonna have it. We're not gonna like try and stop you from doing that. So you can mix as much as you want during those 20 days.
See, that's great. And see, when you have a really great plugin, you can feel good about doing that, giving people a trial and then all that. It's sometimes it feels sometimes it doesn't feel right. Like, they're just trying to get you to when companies offer a free trial, it's like, well, first of all, I should also mention that you guys, you to install oeksound plugins, we don't need like an installer or any other software, right?
It's only it's the licensing that we do. The license management that we have is the iLok license manager.
Right. What I'm thinking of.
You don't need a dongle or something like that. You only need like the iLok account. That's it. But we're not taking any information from you. We're not gonna like start following you or following you around and start sending you email unless you want us to. And we probably send like 4 emails per year. Right. List. So
actually, what I was talking about was like with Acoustica and Waves, like with Waves, for instance, Waves plugins, you have to download their whole installer and management software to install a plugin. And what I'm saying with oeksound, with soothe2 and spiff, you don't have to do that. You just install it.
Yeah, you just go to our download page and you're going to get the installer directly. And that's that's the only thing you need. It's easy. I like that. All right, well, we're going to run the music. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Hannes, what we do at the end here is we all yell very loudly. We yell the words, sound great. And I'll tell you when, but can you yell where you are? Yeah, I'm in my studio.
Okay. So everyone listening, whether you're driving in your car or you're looking at pictures of Ralph M. Rivera on your phone or whatever you're doing, we're all going to yell sound great. And I want you to yell loud, okay? Don't give me any of this half-ass stuff. Okay. All right, go. Sound great!
Yeah. No way. Crazy? Oh, forget it. There's no activity. There's no activity.
You walk away from me, and you can't play that part so well. What do you say?